Episode 6: The Fall of the Soviet Union and its Aftermath. Causes of the collapse: economic problems, stagnation and inefficiency. By the 1980s, the Soviet economy was severely stagnating due to chronic inefficiencies, a heavy reliance on military spending, and a failure to innovate in key sectors. Centralized planning led to widespread misallocation of resources, resulting in shortages of basic consumer goods and a general deterioration in the quality of life for many Soviets. Oil prices. The Soviet Union, heavily dependent on oil exports for foreign currency, was hit hard by the decline in global oil prices in the 1980s. This severely impacted its ability to sustain its economic model and maintain its extensive social welfare programs. Political upheaval. Nationalism and independence movements. Increasing nationalist movements within the constituent republics, such as the Baltic states, Ukraine, and Georgia, pushed strongly for greater autonomy and eventually independence. This fragmentation was symptomatic of the weakening central authority and contributed significantly to the eventual dissolution. Loss of control. The central government's weakening grip on power, evidenced by a loss of control over political and economic reforms, further destabilized the Union. Role of Gorbachev's reforms: perestroika, restructuring. Initiated by Mikhail Gorbachev, these reforms were intended to modernize and liberalize the economy through the introduction of semi-market mechanisms, reduce central control, and increased openness to foreign investment. However, the reforms were too little and too late to save the crumbling economy and instead hastened its decline. Glasnost, openness. This policy aimed to increase transparency in government institutions and encourage public discourse about the state's functioning, inadvertently unleashing a wave of pent-up dissatisfaction and criticism that the government could no longer contain. Impact on global politics: shift in world power dynamics. End of the Cold War. The collapse of the Soviet Union marked the definitive end of the Cold War, heralding the United States as the sole superpower on a global scale. This shift dramatically altered international relations and geopolitical strategies among both developed and developing nations. NATO and EU expansion. Post-Soviet, many Eastern European countries moved to join NATO and the European Union, seeking security and economic stability, which shifted the balance of power in Europe and reduced Russian influence in the region. Perceptions of socialism. Ideological discredit. The fall significantly discredited the model of state socialism as practiced by the Soviet Union, leading many to equate socialism with economic inefficiency and authoritarian governance. This contributed to a global resurgence in capitalist and market-oriented policies throughout the 1990s and early 2000s. Rethinking socialism. In some regions, particularly in Latin America and parts of Asia, the fall led to a critical re-evaluation and adaptation of socialist ideas, blending market mechanisms with social welfare goals, as seen in China's socialism with Chinese characteristics and Venezuela's 21st century socialism. Economic and social aftermath in former Soviet states. Economic hardships. The transition from a planned economy to market-based systems was tumultuous for most former Soviet republics, characterized by severe economic contraction, skyrocketing inflation, and a significant increase in poverty and inequality. Political instability. Many former Soviet states experienced periods of political instability and struggles with newly formed democratic institutions, which in some cases led to authoritarian regimes. The collapse of the Soviet Union thus remains one of the most pivotal events in modern history, influencing not only the former Soviet republics, but also the global structure of politics, economics, and international relations.